We are being recorded.
Perfect.
Yeah. I just had pancakes and bacon for lunch.
Amazing.
That's the work from home lifestyle that we can have.
Breakfast food is a construct.
That's right.
I am messaging Priya to see if she's going to be joining us.
Yeah.
All right, well, while I wait to hear from her, I figure we can do kind of a brief run through of the crosswalk tables and the process in general. And then if you guys want to do a screen share, we can go through configuring all of the file inputs and outputs. That way you guys are good to go and run everything up on your end.
Okay, so if I understand that, you're going to be showing us just through your screen share, and then if we need to, we can run it through our own afterwards.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I just want to make sure that because I'm fairly certain our file structure will be different than your file structure. So I just want to make sure all your inputs are pointing to the right place, that your crosswalks are pointing to the right place, just so you don't run into any hiccups when you try to run this.
Great. Okay.
Let me share my screen. It looks like you have to enable screen sharing.
Yes, I will do that. You are now a co-host.
All right.
We were Zoom bombed at a meeting, so now we have higher security.
Makes sense. Oh, I have so many things open. All right. You all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Do you see File Explorer by any chance?
No, I only see the multi.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was only gonna, this is on a remote desktop, so I wasn't sure if it was only gonna show the remote desktop or if I could share from a different desktop. So we'll go find this folder. You see it now?
I see your File Explorer, yes?
Perfect. All right. We'll go open some crosswalk tables. So these are all pretty much set up the same way. If we take a look at the template. Oh, and there is not docs on this computer. That's all right. All right, so all of these are pretty much set up the same way for each town. Each town has their own individual crosswalk table. So you're going to have, you can ignore the input output. This is mostly just for a trial setup, your input being, here's the file that's going to go into the system. What comes out is, you know, as you've seen, a completely merged file, which is the CSV of all of the towns. From here, how this had worked is your unsure fields. I basically started out with putting anything in here that was a field from the town, and then whatever matched to one of the fields that it was getting converted into would go into this original field column. and then just the description to help with what those columns are, and then whether it's required or not, and then any notes or if a process is required. So let's go take a look at one of those in more detail. This is for Greenwich. And as you can see, you have the original fields, which the way that the process is set up will push it into this LRS num is its link ID, PIN, camera ID local, property zip, site to zip code, etc.
Under the original field column, there's a lot of blanks. Does that mean there's just no original
There's
field
just no
for that
match.
record?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it's blank, it's just going to mean there's not a match. If a match comes in later on, this is where you guys can edit this and add that in.
Okay.
These unsure fields, I mean, it could potentially be one of these. This is what you would want to check with the town with, is do any of these fields, you know, match anything that it would for the overall schema. So as you can see, there are still a lot of fields left, but these didn't seem to necessarily match what the schema was getting pushed into.
So the unsure field, that column doesn't necessarily correspond to, say, the original field column. So if I go like record 7, LRS num, and I cross over, I see area num. Are those related in any way?
These aren't related, no. This is just as reference, so you can see what's left.
Oh, that's why you spaced it out with H, because you can't say
Exactly.
All right, I'm good.
Yeah, and then just any notes. This is also a separate thing. It's, you know, any notes that might need to be taken care of or thought of. So for this one, it looks like property street was formatted oddly, so there needs to be a formula to take care of that if you want it to be perfect. This process field, it will basically do a very basic calculations. So if you see for town name wasn't given in the original field, but obviously we know this is Greenwich. So what this does when it's in FME is if you just type in Greenwich, it'll auto-populate, you know, town name across the board with Greenwich for the town of Greenwich for anything in that data set. And then same with the town ID. So if there's ever anything that's not filled out, but you know what it is and it applies across the board to the town, you can just put it in this column.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, it's Greenwich.
Oh, sorry.
Just in case you find yourself in that town, they'd probably complain.
Fair enough.
It's an uptight group.
It's the same here. We have weird names like Worcester, which is spelled like Worcester.
Worcester, yeah.
Yep.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So for the process, I see Greenwich and then 57 below it. So do both of those values get added to the whole, table?
Yeah, so 57 would be the town ID for everything in Greenwich. Yeah. Was that right?
That was right, Greenwich.
All right. Yeah, and we can take a look at how this kind of gets populated too.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, so anything for the town name in this data set gets filled in with Greenwich. Anything with town ID gets filled in as 57.
Okay, thank you.
Just for this town. So obviously this wouldn't apply to, you know, any of the other towns. They have their own. If they don't have the fields as their original fields, they would have their own process that shows this.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's pretty much what these look like. Some of them, I believe there's one or two that have simple processes for the site address where it just combines the street number and then the street name. That way you have the full site address. And that's also populated in here. Because it can handle very simple calculations like that. It gets hard, FME or data interop has a harder time with more complex calculations. So those are handled within the process itself. And we'll go over that in case there needs to be any updates.
Gotcha.
But that's pretty much what the crosswalk tables look like. This is what you'll be editing. This is what'll drive the process essentially. Any questions around those before I move on?
Yeah, just one question. So for this preliminary round of basic modifications to tables, such as like the Greenwich or the 57, What's kind of like the limit for what it can handle? Can it do like, it take one field and another field and combine them into one? Or does that go beyond its ability? Like, cause you could take street name, street number, street address, like you were saying.
Yeah, so it can do that. Let me see if I can find one that handles that.
Is it kind of like equivalent to what can be done in Excel, like basic Excel merging abilities?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Okay, so anything like, these are some regex expressions. These ones I can't actually handle, but I put them in here because just as, you know, copy and paste into the into what's called an attribute creator, which is one of the transformers within data interop. So this, it can't do on its own without having an attribute creator within the process. You're gonna have to bear with me. I forget the specifics of each of these.
Okay.
Something like mailing zip, this one it struggled with as well. But I know it can handle, I mean, just as an example for you to see, and anything, so the way that data interop reads these is it has @value written in. So say you wanted to populate, you know, this one already has their site address, but basically it would be something like value, there's num, and then just a space, and then another @value.
Right, that would kind of.
Full street is what that, and it can handle that, and that's about all it can handle within this column.
That's a great example, thank you.
Yeah. Land use, I know you've seen these before. These are pretty much, you know, I haven't changed any of these, but you need them as they're separate CSV files. So these are all separated out per town. And if we jump into the process, it can be overwhelming. I promise it's not. Go ahead, Nick.
Before we move on, thank you. So the land use and the canvas just have to be separate, or does every single thing that you kind of want to add to the parcel, to the property card, have to be separate in tables?
So the land use is separate because
sorry to interrupt you guys. I'm sorry, I completely blew the time on the meeting. I didn't mean to hang around. I just wanted to pop in and say hi, Mike.
Hi, Priya. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So are you guys all set off the races with the training, Ashley?
Yeah, it's going great.
Okay, good. So yeah, I had Russell join this as well because he's going to be doing some of this. So I had planned to be at the beginning to do the intros, but I guess you guys got it. So so go ahead. I just wanted to say hi.
No worries. Much appreciated.
Yeah,
Take care. Be well, Priya.
Yeah, you too.
So these are working a little differently because what we're doing is converting an attribute that already exists for different records and pushing that into, you know, what it is for the state. So this is what, Mike, I believe you set these up?
I believe so, but that was a while ago.
I know. So basically this is saying, you know, if in this town there is a code of 31, that applies to a code of 200 for the state.
Okay.
So processes. Yeah, so this is handled in a different transformer, and we'll go over that as well. But these need to be set up as different tables because they do a slightly different process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before we jump in? All right. So if you guys haven't seen this yet, this is everything. I promise it's not as overwhelming as it looks. Because each town, you know, either we had a Warren report, we had a CSV, an Excel, a geodatabase, or parcels and Gamma combined, I split it out just into, is it parcels and Gamma? Which towns have parcels and Gamma combined into the same data set or into a polygon? Which town has Warren report, which town has, I can zoom in a little bit too. which towns are using a text file, so CSV or Excel, because each of these get handled, a little differently. Darien, as we know, had both a commercial and residential, so that's just pointed out very specifically for you guys. Unless they change it, then this can be, narrowed down to one. This was an Excel rather than the 3 different CSV files. So, this is handled slightly differently. And then you have everything that was, a geodatabase. So you had both the camera and the parcels in a geodatabase or as a DBF file.
Got it. That's very clear. Thank you.
Yep. And then, I made sure we know which each one is. So Danbury, Westport, New Milford.
Oh, smart. You use the labels in there. Great.
And then these ones don't have their labels, but, you can see their file names. So, and these are the ones that are polygons and have both their parcels and camera combined. So if we take a look at these ones first, what you'll see throughout all of these, if they have a land use crosswalk, is this attribute mapper. So if we go and look at these, you'll see pretty much exactly what we saw in those Excel tables is here's the source value. So this is what's in the town data to begin with. And then here's what we want to force it to become when it, gets pushed into that full data set. If you need to add this in, what you're gonna, so what this, what this base kind of looks like. Or there are less of those. There we go. So if we just if we were to add one of these, because there are some towns that I know don't have their land use yet. So this, when you open this for the first time, it'll look like this and won't have anything set up. But if we go to import and we pick out one of those, oh, where are we? Let's go find WestCOG. So if we just pick out one of these crosswalk tables, say open it, it should be able to automatically read it as, oh, this is a CSV. We click next. We're going to use attribute values. CSV is fine. You go to next. Your source value is your, you'll have to take a look at these, but usually it's this local LU code. And then you're pushing it into the state LU code. So if we click import, there you go. It adds everything in, and then it knows when it runs through this step of the process. Set this to, well, this isn't connected to anything, but your source attribute is going to be, whatever it is in the source.
So we created the crosswalk, you loaded the crosswalk, you explained which fields it needs to plug into, and now we have crosswalk data sets.
Yep, exactly.
Great.
So if we were to look at this one, so it's land use for Newton in here. And then if we were to just run this tiny piece, I apparently
fatal error.
This is because I don't have an advanced license set up on this machine, or they're all being taken by my other colleagues. So I can't necessarily show you that, but it essentially takes that original attribute and, as I said, pushes it into the state attribute.
I could probably give up a license if you really want to do it.
Yeah, there are going to be other examples
would you mind, Russell?
That'd be great. That's great. We got one of the advanced users online.
Okay, you should be good, I think.
All right, let's try that again. There we go.
Hey, no fatal error. That's great.
Yeah, so if we look at this original data set, find
Weird.
land
Look at
use. There it is. So 494 is vacant land, single family. And then if we look at this guy, and in here we're looking for, we just click on one of these, it'll be a little bit faster if we look over here. It didn't change it, so it should just be state LU code, so 600. So this land use, as we saw up here, 490 forest, gets pushed into this 600. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any questions around how the land use crosswalk tables work? Or how to set those up? All right,
Those are pretty
perfect.
straightforward.
So going from there, the next thing that is in all of these is your schema mapper, and this is where your actual crosswalk gets set up. So if we go ahead and look at this, what you want to put in is, crosswalk table for whichever town you're working on. So make sure that's set up, and we can go over, how to make sure all these inputs are correctly set up on your end. If we go to next, this is already set up in here, but we can take a look at it with edit. Basically, how you're going to set this up is your source attribute is going to be your original field, your destination, the new field, what it's getting pushed into. Your default value, as we kind of talked about, is going to be this process field. And then source attributes, you can either keep or remove these. It shouldn't necessarily have an effect either way.
What is a source attribute, anyways?
This is
Where the
your
data came from?
original fields. So it's just asking you whether you want to keep a copy of it, basically.
Oh, I get you. Yep.
And either way, I have this, there's an attribute manager at the end of these that'll handle those, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. The way that FME or data interop likes to handle things is it will still kind of keep the fields, but it keeps it in the background unless you do what's called an expose. And you're like, no, I want to actually see the fields. Otherwise, they're just kind of hidden and don't apply until you ask them to apply. So if you were to add a new one of these map attributes, all you would do is click on this little plus sign down here and go to attribute map. And then kind of as we saw, we'd go ahead and set that up. So your source attribute is your original field, and it'll highlight it too, which is very helpful. Destination is your new field. And then this is going to be your process, and you would just click OK, and it would go ahead and create a new one for you. So after it runs through that, basically what you'll get is, because I don't have an attribute exposure on here, it won't show it within the table, but you can see it over here in these values. So we'll go ahead and take a look. Just click on one of these, so you can see that it's now added, everything that's for the state, whether it's empty or whether it actually has something that applies to it. So like your land area acre was pushed in, local description for land use was pushed in, land use for the state was pushed in, etc. Going through all of these.
Oh, gotcha.
Even if they didn't necessarily have it, like they don't seem to have last sale price, that field is still pulled in. That way it can apply when you push everything into the full data set at the end. Any questions around that? This is where you don't have to worry too much. This is just set up the crosswalk table and then make sure you input it into the schema mapper.
Okay, so it seems like the schema mapper is doing the bulk of the work. That attribute mapper that we built, that was just for the land use part, which was a little bit different, you said. So we did first the land use, and then we put in all the CAMA data now with the schema mapper.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
One thing to make sure of, the reason this is the land use is happening before the schema mapper is if we go ahead and take a look at these. So I think Bethel is one of them.
I got a hunch of what you're going to point out.
So, obviously state LU code is not in the schema for this town, but because we are making it part of the schema for the town before the schema mapper, you just have to make sure to put this in here and say, hey, the state LU code is going to become this land use regional. So if you're messing with the crosswalk tables, just make sure of things like that. Otherwise, it's not going to push into the regional schema.
Gotcha. So you had to, because that data set didn't have state land use, we had to add it in manually.
Yes, because it's getting created from that land use attribute mapper.
Right. Very good.
All right, so next, what you usually see is some attribute creators for these parcel ones. There aren't really many of them other than this one because they're all set and good to go. One that is added is, which town is this? Weston. So for Weston, they had a camera link that needed to be calculated. Yeah, so on App-Geo, you know, you have your camera link, right? Your property record cards. So this one is kind of an example of a calculation that can't happen directly in the crosswalk table, so needs to be pointed out in this attribute creator field. So all this is really doing is saying, you know, take this link and make sure that after equals, it's the value of unique ID, which is then your camel link. So it's taking this unique ID value and pushing it into basically this string equals unique ID.
Right. Yeah, you're building a text string, and
Yeah.
unique ID is the factor that's changing.
Yeah. So this is something where when you put it in Excel, it gets a little confused. So just, you got to add a little attribute creator and be like, no, this is the camel link. This is what it looks like. So pretty simple formula, but that's kind of a case where these come in handy and where you got to check these as well. And
oh, I see, attribute creator. Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah, and you'll see these throughout too. A lot of them have them, and we'll go over the little intricacies that are in each of them. From here, what all of these matchers are, because these data sets are basically their parcels, but then have Gamma combined, what was happening is there are stacked parcels in here. However, App-Geo can't handle stacked parcels. It gets really frustrated and confused. It's like, what is going on? Because
do you mean like condos with multiple properties in a single parcel? So you write stacked? Okay.
Yeah, or multiple addresses or camera records in a single parcel. Yeah, exactly. So usually condos, sometimes there's multifamily. So pretty much what these matchers are doing is identifying like, hey, are there parcels stacked on top of each other, or is there a single parcel? You won't have to worry about this too much. It's set up and good to go. It doesn't need to be touched, but just so for your reference about what it's doing. And then these attribute creators on the end, I believe this one is, yeah, so these two apply to everything that's getting pushed into Gamma, and then this one's everything that's getting pushed into parcels. So this is going to be everything that is a single parcel, and this is going to be everything that these two apply to everything that is that single parcel and anything that is stacked on top. So this is taking care of the attributes that are getting pushed to Gamma. This is taking care of whatever is just a single parcel and making sure that gets pushed over. So in here you have things like link ID, which in order for, also ignore the red, it's gonna tell you it's an error. The only reason it's saying that there's an error is they're not what's called exposed. So these values exist. FME doesn't think they exist because we haven't exposed them yet, but they are there, as you can see when we click on, if we go back here and click on any of these data sets, you know, it knows they exist, but it has issues knowing they exist because they don't show up in this table. But don't worry about those errors.
Okay.
It's not a real error.
Is that just because it hasn't like run through yet to create those values?
So something that I had found out a little after I set this up, and you are welcome to add these in, is if you throw something on called an attribute exposer, if we were to run it through, well, what you then have to do is kind of like what we did with the land use table, except for import the schema of the regional schema in here, which we could do by going to, let's see, if we just put in template if we go to next, we want attribute values, and we want to do this new field. And if we say import, what this is doing is it's saying, oh, if these fields exist, press OK. Now all those, red symbols go away.
Yeah.
So pretty much what's happening is this attribute exposer is just saying, hey, no, these fields exist, like they're real. Let's take a look at them in the attribute table. So instead of just seeing them over here, you'll see them all in here as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I didn't add these attribute exposers. You are welcome to add them. They might make your life a little bit less insane because you won't see all the fake errors that are popping up.
Do they slow down
that I discovered
processing?
later on. Go ahead.
Do they slow down processing if you have everything exposed like that then?
It might. If you're going to be looking at, this process, I believe takes about, honestly, I forgot how long because it's been a while, but I think it takes at least up to 30 minutes, possibly longer. So definitely if you're telling it to, look at all of these, it's going to take a while because it's going to be reading all of these values in when it doesn't necessarily need to, because it's doing all the work for you. It doesn't necessarily need to see it until the very end.
Yeah. Okay.
So certainly something to test. I haven't played with it too much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, Ashley, for the stacked properties, are they being resolved so they exist, or are they just taking the primary one? How did that work?
Yeah, so what it's doing for these is it's taking, essentially what's happening is if there are stacked parcels, it's saying, okay, I want these 3 stacked parcels, ignore the geometry because we don't want those to go into Camma, but take all of those Camma records and put it into this Camma output. In order to go into parcels, I only want one of those parcels. I don't need all 3 stacked. I just need one single geometry. So take that single geometry, and yeah, it'll choose the first Camma record. It doesn't matter too much because for the parcels, all you need is the geometry and then an ID. So those will get pushed through to the parcel data set.
So I haven't tested this in the AppGeo site, but does that mean we might lose some property data? Like we won't be able to look at condo 6 in the big property. It'll only show condo 1.
The way that AppGeo works is it'll take it. So AppGeo creates its own essentially crosswalk table in the back end. It's what's called an intersection table.
Yeah.
That intersection table has, it uses the IDs. So if there is a single parcel with a certain ID, it'll then say, hey, these 3 Camma records have this one parcel ID. So it'll match those 3 Camma records to that single parcel ID.
Choose the one you want at that point. It'll show you the 3.
Yeah. So if you were to click on it in AppGeo, it'll show you those 3 records.
Okay, that sounds familiar. All right, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the reason why, so if you were to push those as 3 stacked parcels, what happens in AppGeo is it's like, whoa, what are you clicking on? What do you want me to do? So you have to separate them. So your Camma table
one
has
polygon, and you get multiple Camma outputs, and then an intersection table is made so it's functional over on the AppGeo side.
Yeah, so it creates that one-to-many relationship.
Great.
All right, so then these attribute creators, fairly similar to what we talked about before. Link ID for these ones was your town ID, then your map block lot. So these had to be created. Camma ID regional, just to give it a regional ID so that AppGeo doesn't get confused. So it's going to be the town ID dash the local ID. These you shouldn't have to worry about. They should be fine and good to go, but just for your reference in case anything ever looks wonky. This one, when it says something like 2 possible values, it means there's a conditional value. So if you click on this down arrow and go down here, this is just fixing the zip code, it looks like. So anything that has a mailing zip that is, values of 9, essentially it's just missing a 0, I believe.
Yeah.
So this is handling that and making sure that, it's 5 digits or
classic
10 digits, whatever it needs to be.
Okay, great. It looks like that link ID that's a unique value. That's the town ID, the map value, the block value, and the lot value. So you have these unique.
Yep, your link ID is what's going to be connecting your CAMA and parcels within AppGeo.
Yep. Okay, I understand this. Great, 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 great.
So if we go through all of these, they're pretty much going to be the same thing. It's just making sure all these values are populated. Link ID, mailing zip, fixing any issues. And then this attribute manager at the end. Oh, sorry. What this is doing is just getting rid of, anything that was an original field. So saying, hey, we don't want this to come through. We only want, this is for parcels specifically. This is what's getting pushed into the parcel data set. So for parcel data set, we want the town name so we can identify which town the parcels belong to. We want the parcel ID so that we can, make sure the parcel ID is being shown on AppGeo when you zoom in. Street number, we had said we wanted to pull from the parcels and have as annotation. So that's sitting on the parcelator so that we can have it visually exposed on AppGeo. Same with the acres. Link ID, because that's how they connect to each other. Your parcel original ID. And then land use so that we can create that theme layer for land use on AppGeo as well, which is being taken from the parcel layer.
So you have more records than we need. So not all of them are put into the output. The input is everything we have. The output is what we're choosing to create for the output
exactly.
file.
And then because I put this attribute exposer on, it's now exposing all these attributes, which you would want to make sure to get rid of these because we don't want these in the parcels. So it's just going to bog the parcel layer down. So these is what you want to push into CAMA, not parcels. These wouldn't normally be showing, but like I said, we had added this little attribute exposer.
Gotcha.
And then, if you do want to take these out, you can scroll down and shift on all of them and click on this minus. And it just says, okay, we're going to remove all these because they don't apply.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
So that's how those are getting handled, the ones that are both parcels and CAMA combined. If we go down, this is the Warren report. So this one, if we go in here and look at this, so there are 3 different CSVs. So what this input writer is doing is pretty much saying to read, I believe this is in a single, you're gonna have to bear with me, I forget how Stanford is set up. Perfect, yeah. So it's pretty much saying anything in this folder, I want you to take in. So it's taking in all of these text files and combining it into a single text file within this writer.
Right, just a big gross text file,
Yep. And then, like we've seen before, schema mapper, this is set up the same way. Attribute creator, so anything that just has a more complex formula that needs to be handled. It looks like for this one, site address, what was going on? So for this one, site address had a bunch of those pipes. And so what it's saying is, hey, take anything where the site address has a pipe and just get rid of it. We don't want to see pipes. So, any cleanup that needs to be done on the data, you can do that in attribute creator. And again, this is just because there's no exposer. It does exist. FME is just like, it don't exist because there's not an exposer.
Is that all like regex? Or how do you decide what, oh, that's a tool. It looks like a tool. Replace string. You're saying value.
So we go down here.
Or replace pipe with blank, quote, quote.
Yep.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah. You can see all of your string functions that you might need or math functions.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, tools ready to go.
FME has a really good, all of their documentation is great. I know it's data interop, but it's using FME. So something that I defer to a lot of the time when I'm unsure of how to calculate certain things, if you just type in FME.
Cat, FME cat. Just in search item.
there should be, if I can type correctly. There we go. So this document is super
Great.
helpful.
Yeah.
It'll, tell you exactly what those formulas do and kind of how to set it up. So if you ever need to, just quick Google search for FME functions and it'll pop up.
Okay.
If you ever need to know about any specific tool, same thing, just type in FME in the tool that you're looking for, and their documentation is wonderful. Looks like some of the other ones in here, so their book and page. This is where regex is being used. I couldn't necessarily tell you exactly what this is doing off the top of my head.
No, don't worry about it. Every time we get in there, we have to relearn it.
Yeah, exactly, same. And Russell's just getting his head around regex, so same thing there.
Yep.
So yeah, any of those kind of calculations, again, just making sure that you do it in the attribute creator. This is again setting up that link ID. I've also separated out whether it's a shapefile parcel or down here if it's a parcel in a geodatabase. So what?
So messy. I mean, this is great. This is great to figure it all out. I'm just thinking about how each town does their data differently.
Yep.
Really
That's why each
exposes the
town's getting
complexity.
handled a little differently.
Right.
Yeah.
It really exposes the complexity that is created by that process.
So for Stamford, we don't have their parcels yet. Or do we? We do, but they're not connected, it looks like.
That's right. They have no GIS link.
Yep, that's what it was.
It was not provided.
So we'll go over this a little bit after when we hit the next town. But basically, reader, you're going to put the parcels in. Attribute manager, you only, for Stamford, it was only town name that existed. You want to make sure that you're only keeping the fields that you want to push to parcels. And if we're going to scoot this way a little bit, this is just parcel cleanup. You don't have to worry about this at all. You should never have to touch this. It's just dealing with weird overlaps or weird aggregates that are happening in parcels. So it's just a cleanup. Getting down here, one of these, this GeoJSON is what's getting pushed into AppGeo. And then this shapefile, I believe, is for your references. So those will be your two outputs. They're the same thing. One is just a shapefile and one's a GeoJSON. Let me take out that attribute exposure because that is messing with everything.
Sorry, Nick. Had to go.
You are welcome to put it back in. Just make sure in the attribute managers you take them out. So as you can see, it was showing all of those fields. We really only want these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields coming into parcels, just because it's really going to bog it down otherwise. Yep. So kind of like we had gone over before, you want your parcel ID, so you know what the parcel ID is. Link ID is how they're connecting. You want to be able to know the town. You need it regionally just because in some cases, some towns just share the same parcel ID and that really freaks out AppGeo. And again, that's simply a matter of adding in the town ID in front of whatever their link ID is. Acres, because we want to show that as annotation. Land use, because we want to create a theme. And then street number for annotation as well. So again, don't worry too much about this. It's just cleanup. It shouldn't have to be touched again. But that's what these attribute managers at the end are handling. They're being pushed to parcels, not to Camma. Camma is coming directly after these attribute creators. Those are getting pushed into this Camma output.
Ashley, in the weird case where like I accidentally mess up something in that area I should be playing around in, is this FME workbench cable, like, could you be like, oh yeah, here it is again. I could just kind of copy and paste that section back in. Does that make sense, my question?
Into which piece?
So, okay. So we're gonna be potentially tampering with all the Camma field edits in these boxes, in the Warren report, the text file, Excel box, the Stanford box. And that's where we'll play around. But if I were to accidentally mess with that polygon, the parcel editing section that we're not supposed to,
this area,
Yep. Are we able to call up AppGeo and say, hey, we messed up our fixed geometry box. Can you send us another
Yeah, of
copy
course.
or something?
We have a copy. Obviously, this is our copy on our database, and this isn't going anywhere. This is going to stay in your town folder for, forever, most likely. I don't see this ever going away.
Sure.
So if you ever, need to call us up for anything or you need help, we will definitely be here.
Yeah, I guess my question is it a matter of like, I could delete the damaged ones and load in this section into the workbench, or do I have to like start over? Or I don't
What
know.
do you mean by?
Like
Oh,
if
you
I
mean
were to,
like if you were to accidentally take out like geometry validator? And
yeah,
you
so
wanted to do that?
I'm reading the tab, right? It says fixed geometry, remove nulls,
Yeah.
remove overlaps, remove. So if that section got damaged somehow, I messed around with it.
Yeah.
Am I able to get that section and load it back into my, I don't know what you call this, a workbench, my project?
Workbench, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be a matter of, what we could do is send you this file again, or even if you just keep a file and if you want to mess with it, then make a copy. That's kind of what I did. I had 2 copies of these for a little while as I was figuring things out for you all.
Right, and then we can just rebuild off the copy.
Yeah.
I see. So it's really just a matter of rebuilding from a copy. You're not like copying
Yeah,
and
I mean, you
pasting.
can really, if you could copy this whole section,
Oh, you can.
paste it, and it should paste the whole thing. If that doesn't work, you can highlight all of these. And
Okay, that's what I was
copy and
wondering.
paste.
Okay, so we have a number of options to repair mismanagement.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that human error.
Yeah, of course.
All right, thanks.
All right. So then this is getting down into anything that is either a CSV or an Excel in terms of their CAMA. So if we look at Danbury, same thing. This is going to be their land use, then their crosswalks, anything that needs to be calculated. So again, fixing zip code, CAMA ID regional. I'll get into explaining what this dummy is when we hit parcels.
Okay.
Link ID, town name. For whatever reason, in Danbury, what was happening is they have a field for town name, but what happens is some of them are all lowercase, some of them are all uppercase,
Yep.
some of them are spelt incorrectly. So all this is doing is say, hey, anywhere that there is a, just make the entire town name field be capital
All
Danbury.
caps Danbury. That's great. Yeah. So I'm going to try reading it.
So yeah, anywhere there's data issues, just attribute creator is your friend.
Gotcha.
So again, this attribute creator, if you can kind of see this highlighted line, that's getting pushed into your CAMA output. And this is just, what this is doing is taking it from every single town and pushing it in here. That's why you see a billion lines. Or however many times there are, 12 lines. Moving into parcels. So you have your parcel reader. And then there's this attribute manager. So this is where we're going to say, I don't want any of these specific CAMA fields. I only want to see these ones.
But those ones are not options. They're all grayed out, right? So I can't even unselect or select those. That was trying to say.
It's because they're being removed. So I could say do nothing and it'll say.
Oh, they're being removed. I understand.
Mm-hmm. Feature merger is in here. That way you can take these specific CAMA attributes and push them into parcels, because parcels don't necessarily have those 7 attributes that you want to see. So this feature merger is basically a join. So what's happening is it's, hey, take this parcel ID. You have to do link ID dummy is the exact same thing as your link ID. Link ID dummy is not something that applies to your schema or your data set at all. This is just because it has to happen in processing, because what happens is, for whatever reason, it gets confused with the pure link ID. And it's like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, you can't have this both as an attribute and as something that I'm connecting to. I forget what the exact issue was. But basically I just created a new field and then I get rid of it afterwards. It's simply for making sure that those CAMA attributes get pushed into the parcel data set.
Okay.
So if ever there's anything, mostly I would just say, just use a link ID dummy, even if you aren't sure whether it's gonna work or not. Just safer to have a dummy for whatever reason. And again, as we look back here on this attribute creator, it's literally just the link ID.
Mhm.
So put in another attribute manager just to make sure that we're not having, you know, any fields that we accidentally kept, making sure we get rid of this link ID dummy because it doesn't apply to the schema. It's only for that little join. Link ID over here, making sure that you add the town ID and the parcel ID for this link. So some of these still need to be calculated, and this is exactly like the attribute creator. You can calculate them within attribute manager as well. So yeah, this is just adding town ID. It's making sure that these are set up for parcels.
Okay.
And then removing anything that you don't want. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
All right, any questions about that? All of these are pretty much the same setup.
Looks good.
All right. If you want to take a brief look at Darien, because they have both a commercial and a residential, the only difference here is that when you push them through, you basically have two connectors. So this is from commercial, you want this to go to parcels. This is from, or vice versa, this is from residential, you want it to go to parcels. And then same thing up here, just make sure they're both being connected to this CAMA output. If this ever does get merged into one, you can just get rid of one of these, you know, highlight it,
Right.
delete it. Those connections will go away.
Okay.
Geodatabase parcels aren't done any differently. It was more just as a heads up as to what they are and where they go. So these are set up the same way as those shape files. It's just saying, hey, this is in a geodatabase. The difference being, you know, this is coming from a geodatabase rather than a shape file.
Okay.
And we can go over how to set those up. This one, kind of similar to the other Warren export, except what's happening is it's pulling in all of the sheet names rather than 3 different CSV files. But then right after that, same process. It doesn't have land use, but going straight to the schema, mather, dealing with any wonkiness in the data, and then pushing it all in. Geodatabase CAMA, same thing. It's just, you know, a CAMA file within the geodatabase, but they're all set up the same way.
Okay.
So pretty much what you're going to be touching with any of these edits are going to be those crosswalk tables. If you ever need to add a land use table, we kind of went over that, how to set up a schema mapper, and then these attribute creators, you know, if ever you need to do a calculation. And then at the end, just making sure these attribute managers are set up to only have those 7 fields that are getting pushed into your parcels. Are there any questions about any of this?
Just one. Yeah, I have one. All right, cool. So we got our land use tool that figures out the land use codes. Then we got our attribute creator for case we got to add a few attributes like town ID or town. And then we got a schema tool that figures out all the CAMA fields and where they go.
Yep.
Then for the final product, that polygon parcel layer that has all this CAMA attributes associated to it, that's being minimized to those 7 attributes.
Yep.
So that's kind of like the final product that's developed. That's the output, right? We're
Yep.
not creating multiple outputs. So if we wanted to create we could modify and create our own polygon output, maybe has more fields. Or does it also create I guess my question is, does it create a table of CAMA data that can readily join to the parcel layer? Or is the output only that one polygon layer that has CAMA data to it?
So there are 3 outputs in this process. You have parcels, these are both the same exact thing. One is just a shapefile and one's a GeoJSON. So the GeoJSON is what gets pushed into AppGeo. The shapefile is for your reference, whatever you need it for. Just because, you know, obviously that's a more attainable data set than a GeoJSON. And then you have this camera. So this camera is, if we open this, it's, goodness. Give it a second to load. There we go. Ignore these reds. Again, it's just because of that exposure issue.
Exposure, yeah.
But this is every field that's in that schema for Gamma.
Oh, great.
And this is getting pushed into an overall, just every town is in this Gamma CSV. So that's that Gamma output.
Great. Great. So we can build whatever we want. We have a, what kind of file is that output?
This is just a CSV.
CSV, yeah.
So yeah, a text file.
Great.
If we go into this data, it's basically this Gamma output, which it'll take, I mean, this is, you know, all the towns combined and all their data combined. So it might take a minute.
Got it. Because we're thinking about, we might want to post the Gamma and parcel data sets on our website for sharing, but we got to do it in such a way we get suppressed data out of there and sensitive data out of there. But I'm just kind of curious how, you know, what are the outputs? So that's good. So with a Gamma and a polygon that can be linked to it, anybody could grab it and use it however they need to.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a huge data set, so it could take a while.
Oh, I'm sure.
As you can see, 94 kilobytes. So. And then parcels as well. I don't know that we have ARC set up on this machine specifically. But that's either your shapefile or your GeoJSON file.
While we're waiting, just a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
What's the light blue circle right before the writer? Is that like a union?
This is nothing.
There's nothing?
Oh, here's the data set.
Okay.
We'll look at that in a second. So what this is was basically just to make it easier to see where everything was going through.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever have, we can look over here. If you ever have like 12 things going to this one, if you right click on this little arrow and you say insert junction,
Okay.
that's all it is. It's just making it so that it's easier to see kind of, you know, if you have a billion things going into one transformer, just to kind of nicely combine it so that it doesn't look as messy.
A little less spaghetti monster.
I with that too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley.
Of course. Yeah, so if we take a look at the CSV, I mean, you'll see we have Stanford's data, and this is all in the, you know, all in the schema for the regional use. So you have Stanford, I mean, this is everything. Norwalk, Danbury, Bethel, Westport, New Milford. So just one huge data set.
Right.
Every town.
Great.
Do we want to open up your process and data interop, make sure that it's, you know, it will actually open, and then we can set up the inputs and outputs?
We do, yes. Before we jump into that, I just had one quick question for you, Ash. I'm going to load up my computer now. So is this like what you do full time? You're like the FME specialist over at AppGeo? I was kind of curious how much time you put in working with these tools.
At the moment, yes. We used to have someone who did a lot more work on this than I did. And I mean, he has since left the company and I kind of took that place for him. So I probably use FME the most. We do have several other analysts who use it a lot, and Russell's coming on board to, you know, really dig into it more too. So we're very, I mean, as a company, we're fairly, you know, we try to make sure everyone kind of has a similar skill set. I would definitely say that I spend the most time in here simply because I do a lot of the ETL kind of processes and a lot of the data science.
Got it. All right, so should I share my screen?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing mine.
Okay. Let's see how this works. Yes, I can show my virtual desktop. Good. Okay. I think you see my virtual desktop.
I do, yes.
Great. I have, how do I get in there? Do I go into,
So if we
do I
open
up
Arc
Pro or, yeah?
Yep. And if you go to the Analysis tab.
Yeah.
And Data Interop. Right next to Geostatistical Wizard on the ribbon.
Geostatistical Wizard data intro. There it is.
Yeah, and then just click on Workbench. Yep.
I think they should have had a real wizard. I'd find that faster. I haven't opened this before. Here we go. It works. You see that window too? Great.
Yep. So then if we just open that file that I had sent to you.
I'll click open and I'm gonna navigate somewhere. Here we go. C drive. Here we go. There's crosswalks. Here's a schema mapping backup.
Yep.
Schema mapping.
So that one. Yep. The backup, what's nice about Data Interop in FME is it will always create a backup log for you. That way if it closes out or crashes, it saves the last thing you did.
Excellent. Look at this team, I'm in there. I just built this. Wow.
Nice job.
Thank you.
All right. So I would say let's go through each of these readers and just make sure that it's pointing to the data where you guys have it set up. That way you're not getting confused, or it's not getting confused when it's like, where's the A drive? This doesn't exist.
Gotcha. All right. So just double click one of these.
Yeah, so if we go to, you should see that little cog above it when you highlight
I see when I highlight it. Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really little because I have resolution so high.
It should be the third
Edit, disable.
Yeah, you want to click on edit. Yep.
Oh, I can't even see the cog. It looks like it's a red X. All right.
All right, so if you click on those triple dots.
Yeah, I can find it. I can navigate to.
Yeah, and this is for, what's that first one, Newton?
I guess I don't know where I'm going.
So this is the town data that they would have sent you.
Yeah. So I unzipped. Oh, template geo database. This is probably it. What, it's supposed to read Newtown? Is there a Newtown geo database?
Select the geodatabase folder.
Okay. And I press OK.
Yeah, let's press OK and see if it gets upset about that or if it
Allowed it.
seems fine.
Okay.
Yes, I would do that for the next three. You could either go ahead and do that now or.
So am I going to be choosing the same geodatabase?
Yeah, I believe these are all in the same geodatabase.
Oh, I should just copy the link.
Is this a test or is he connecting to like the actual?
Although that, hold on, that template geodatabase, that's something I sent you, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, you want to be looking for the data that the town had sent you. So that template geodatabase is what's creating, and sorry, I should have gone over this sooner. That's what's creating that CAMA output and the parcel output. So there are just dummy features in there in order to make the files that you get as outputs.
I understand.
Yeah, that was my question. I wanted to know if this was practice or if this was the real thing. So this is the real thing.
Yep.
Parcel CAMA acquisition database. Town data 2019.
There we go.
Yeah, what's this? Oh wow, I got too many folders. We'll have to figure that out later. All right, well hold on, let me just copy this. Oh my god. Let me capture everything with a triple click. All right, let's try this again. Navigating for me? Looks like it does. All right, so this is Weston.
I think this is NE 4 towns.
Oh. Oh, that's the group. Weston, Wilson, Brookfield. Okay. So that must be it. Okay. So I'll just keep connecting to that database then.
Yep, that is accurate.
All right. Okay, this one's the wrong one. I can fix this. Okay. I think I got it all picked up.
And then if you, for the attribute mapper, those should be fine because those should already be uploaded. It shouldn't necessarily take directly from the CSVs. Yeah, perfect. Just hover over that. So those are good. Don't worry about those unless you have to add a new one. The schema mappers, though, we're going to have to make sure we update those outputs. So those will be pointed to your crosswalks.
Okay.
Yeah, so you want to change that data set.
So what am I changing it to? Currently it's at the Newtown.
Yep, so you just want to make sure that's pointing to the Newtown crosswalk in your file explorer. So wherever you had put that data for the crosswalk. Is it already pointing to the right place?
I think it is.
Sweet.
Which is confusing on why I would be doing that. Maybe it's just, it has,
Well,
did you give
that
me?
means that because I sent it to you all in one zip file, it means that it, which I was hoping it would do this, it means that it, yeah, it calculated it for you.
Huzzah.
So that's good.
Okay, great.
So it looks like it's mostly the readers and the outputs then that we're just gonna have to make sure are pointing in the right place.
So I click finish now?
I would just do cancel.
Yeah, don't mess with anything. All right. Okay. 3 of them done. Attribute creator, do we have to mess with that?
Nope.
Okay, we got matcher, 2, 3, 4.
Those are all fine. So those don't rely on any outside data sets.
Okay.
If we go down to the Warren report extracts, the first one, yeah,
No.
let's update that one. So again, if you click on it and go to, sorry, the parameters, this one might need to be done slightly differently. So I just want to make sure this will work.
A drive.
Yeah, that's from us.
Lauren. Okay.
Select all 3 of those and click open. And then press OK.
Okay.
Yeah, that should, perfect. It kept saying all. Yeah, so that should be all set. So yeah, it's just a matter of going through all of those readers for both the parcels and the CAMA and making sure they're pointing to the right place. The only other one that might be tricky, I would say the other Warren report that was coming from a single Excel but has multiple sheets. Let's just make
Warren
sure that
report,
one
Bridgewater?
comes out correctly. Yeah.
There you go.
It should still read the same as long as you're changing it. I just want to make sure.
I didn't get it. 2020 data yet. What the? I must have updated it. I think I merged them playing around with it.
Okay. Well, let's press OK and see if anything else comes up.
Okay. That's going to be, I mean, it probably was before. Oh, what it says Warren Report Excel. So now it's a new Excel document. I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure that'll create some errors.
Let's see what we have it as.
'Cause I'm pretty sure they gave me as, although they only have residential properties, I think.
Bridgewater.
Very tiny town.
We also have a CAMA data Excel. Let's see.
A single file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's that each sheet is different. So it has a sheet for residential, a sheet for commercial, and a sheet for that CDU.
Got it. Sheets.
So I would just make sure that each of those sheets are getting pulled in properly.
Okay.
Which, did you already update the file path?
I did.
Okay, so it should be, my guess is it should be fine. It didn't throw an error.
Okay. This one's called Vision 2018. Is that just the name of the file, or is it
It's just the name of the file, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. All right, cool.
Yeah. So I would update those. For the outputs, it'll be the same process. Just make sure you're, wherever you want those outputs to exist on your system, it's pointed there. You don't have to have them created all yet. It'll create it for you once this runs.
Wait, where do I choose the output? How do I make that happen? There's a number of outputs. Scrolling up.
So those are the ones with the circle in the front are all your readers. The ones with the circle in the back of the transformer that are yellow is your writer. So where it says CAMA output.
Oh, left and right. Here's the output.
Yep, so that's your output. And I would just make sure you update that file path, and just so that, you know, that CAMA output is going to wherever you want it to. Oh my
God. Okay, so that everything's going to this small little.
Yep.
It's so funny. Okay. Wow, workhorse. All right. So this I have to go and modify this.
Yep.
Tell it where I want it to dump all these files.
Yep. And you just have to point it to a folder. It looks like you're putting it in Bridgewater, so just be careful.
Ah. Good eye. All right, select you, select folder. Cool.
Perfect. All right, and then same thing if you scroll to the right, same thing with those two parcel outputs.
All right. Now should I be making separate folders for these output locations too?
You could probably put it in that same folder as your ETL test where you put the CAMA.
Okay. Oh, it's saving as a GeoJSON. Right,
Yep.
right. JSON. All right. That's riveting, guys. This is just doesn't get better than this. Yeah. What? Okay. Cool. Backup one. ETL test. Select folder. All right.
Perfect.
Output locations established.
Yeah, so I would just go through and update all of the inputs because I know that we didn't get through all of those. And then if you want, feel free to run this and make sure that it, runs properly. And you can email me if you have any questions or if anything looks wonky or comes up weird. But it should be good to go once you have everything pathed.
Okay, so you're saying once we're done with this class, this training, I should just go and try that out?
Yeah.
So we're talking about, okay, great. I'll do that.
It will, if you click run for a moment.
Right now?
Yep. Don't actually run it, but if we just click run.
So clicking run's not going to run it?
It's not going to run it. It's going to come up with another prompt first.
There are incomplete transformers in the workplace. Yep.
So for that,
the workplace.
The invalid this will always pop up. So that is coming up because of that attribute exposure I was talking about. So it thinks that things are set up incorrectly. They're not. So you can always just press run.
Gotcha.
The next thing that should come up is then a list of all of your readers and file paths and everything. You can just also ignore that and hit OK.
So should I click run now to see it?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's not gonna, it shouldn't, yeah,
this.
there we go. So that's the list of everything.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. I will give this a go my next opportunity.
The only other thing I can think of that's important to set up, if you cancel out of that, and where it says navigator on the left-hand side of the workbench.
Navigator.
Yep, scroll down in that list.
Tool parameters, tool resources.
So open
bookmarks.
user parameters.
User parameters. Published.
And go to
Parameters, private parameters.
server parameters.
Server parameters. 22 of them.
Yeah, I want to find, there's one that almost always pops up that it's important to set to ignore. Let me figure out where that is real quick.
Sure. Data repository, engine, job ID, security roles. Engine, system log, engine data, dashboard backup, URL, log system temp, desk directory, user, port, headers, method.
Where is this? Oh, sorry. This is under workspace parameters. That's
Okay.
So if you right click, not right click, where is it? There we go. Okay, so under translation.
It's like, where's workplace parameters?
Scroll all the way down.
All
Tool
the way
parameters. There you go. And then translation. All right, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that the ignored failed readers was set to no.
Excellent. It is.
All right. Sometimes that'll be set to yes, and what'll happen is it's not a real error, but for whatever reason, the whole process will just stop if it hits something where it freaks out at, and it's like, you don't actually need to freak out. It's okay. So it's just important that that's set up as no.
Sounds like FME has a lot of anxiety.
Which is a good thing, but you know. But yeah, I finished setting up those readers and then give it a run through, and definitely let me know if there are any problems, you have any questions, anything I can help with. I'm happy to be here for.
Yes, but this is for a short time only. Are you leaving soon?
I'm going to grad school, yes. I will still be around here and there. I'm still working for the company part-time. I will, however, be I will be in a different time zone because I'm going to grad school in Ireland.
Oh, fun.
But I will still be around and available to answer questions if need be. I will just have less availability.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, of
And what
course.
grad school are you going to in Ireland?
I'm going to Trinity Dublin.
Oh, wow, Trinity.
Yeah.
That's great. You can go to the library.
I'm excited for it.
All right. Are there any other components for the training?
That's pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions?
I have one question.
Yep.
So let's say I set this thing up, it runs smoothly, training was great, everything's just peaches, and I get the JSON file, I get my shape file, and I get this camera file.
Mm-hmm.
When I go, my duty to make sure the data is updated into AppGeo, am I sending things to AppGeo, or am I doing that through my AppGeo loader interface? Kind of
Yep, so you would do it through the AppGeo uploader interface.
Wow.
You were given that training, right?
We were.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really put it all together how it works, but now I'm seeing.
Yep, so pretty much it's just a matter of taking those files and telling it to upload.
That's really cool. All right, yeah, so we have the power to upload the data whenever we want.
Did they go over a tool called Cardo? I'm going to take that as a no or maybe. Okay.
Nick's done a lot of the work for us, but you know what? If it's for loading the JSON data into AppGeo, I don't think so. They brushed over it because we didn't really have any data to load in at that time. It was done for us initially. So.
Okay. The reason why I asked that is because these data sets are so large. Sometimes putting them in directly through AppGeo, it can throw an error because they're so large. Yeah. So they have an external tool that will do this. It does the same process, but it uploads it just using a quick script within your command line.
All right. So if we have issues, we just call up AppGeo and say we want this into Cardo.
Yeah, it's called Cardo. It's just a quick download and some quick code.
A download for us or a download for you guys?
For you.
We would download the program called Cardo, or?
It's called, so it's something that our programmers have set up. It's called Cardo. I think it's somewhere on GitHub. I would check in with the product team about it. I haven't downloaded it in a while.
Okay.
And pretty much it's just a simple, something, you'll type it in command line, and all it's doing is connecting to the AppGeo server and grabbing your data and saying, I want to upload it. Okay. It's just because those data sets are so large that sometimes when you upload it through the web browser directly, it freaks out, versus if you upload it through command line, it has an easier time handling it.
Okay, very good.
Cool. Good to know. Yeah. Okay, well, Nick, Tucker, any questions?
No.
All right. Tucker just started working at WestCOG, so he's probably like, wow, there's a lot of stuff. All right, great. Thanks a lot, Ashley. I appreciate it. Very good training. Anytime. Very well run. And I guess we're all wrapped up. I'll let you know how our application goes and wish you the best at grad school.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely let me know. Always here to help. So just reach out.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You too. All right. End the meeting. See you, Russell. Take care. Nice to see you.
You too.